Their zest to govern, that we can stop this, it was an overreach.
In the bill, the penalties for powdered cocaine and crack were different.
Powder cocaine, a drug of choice among mostly middle and upper class abusers. Crack cocaine, a cheaper, faster high for its mostly poor users. Chemically, the drugs are virtually identical, but not in federal court. An arrest for 5 grams of crack brings a mandatory 5 years in federal prison, but you get just the same 5-year sentence for 500 grams of powder cocaine. The law was designed to help clean up crack-infested communities, but instead has become another wedge between blacks and whites.
All these absurd laws are putting people in prison for lengthy terms. And we all know the imbalances in the way people are in prison, who gets incarcerated for the longer periods of time, and it's always people of color. So suddenly you had this massive group of primarily black men going to prison.
President Clinton had a political strategy of saying, we're going to be tough on crime, but we're going to be socially receptive. And the Democratic Party started moving to the right, playing the racial political lines.
Welfare as we know it is now history. President Clinton today signed the legislation that ends a government commitment made 61 years ago of federal aid to the nation's poorest.
What ultimately happens is that there are the unanticipated consequences. For example, they didn't take into account childcare. If you're going to put people back to work, who's ultimately going to take care of the children that are left home? And it was these questions that exposed the weakness of the bill.
I tried to go to work, but I really didn't have childcare. But I was in school. I was doing something, not just sitting around doing nothing.
So you want to work?
Of course.
Welfare becomes racialized in a way in which we begin to hear all of these stereotypes being trotted out about the lazy, dependent welfare queens.
There are more white people on welfare at that time than there were black people. But there was this sense again that welfare is helping those people. It's a handout and we can't do that. So again, Bill Clinton turned on his base with welfare reform.
14 million Americans, mainly black in the cities, white elsewhere, will be hit. More than 1 million children will be thrown into poverty.
There is a significant story of people who have fallen below the radar screen, and people care less and less about what may actually happen to those people.
Clinton is an extraordinarily complicated figure, and his biggest legacies, the crime bill and welfare reform, are going to be disproportionately impacting low-income African-American communities. Do I think that he was actively trying to do this? No. It was politically expedient, and it helps him win re-election.
We have committed this night to continuing our journey to give the young people here and those all across America the America they deserve.
Do you know? These Nike sneaker commercials are an example of just how strong black selling power is.
If I could be like Mike.
Black culture had always been influential, but culturally speaking, the 90s is really the decade when black culture is solidified as the mainstream of American culture. And you have this sharp rise in black superstars making movies and music, from Will Smith to Jay-Z.
So how did it feel to be #1?
It's a beautiful thing, like #1 in the whole country. That's a major accomplishment.
There was a lot of people experiencing success visibly.
The most prestigious award for literature has gone today to the American novelist Toni Morrison, the Nobel Prize.
I think I'm the first African-American to win the Nobel Prize.
Wow.
And that is astonishing.
Suddenly people who we look to as heroes and as markers of dignity and grace and talent and success, suddenly America was looking at them too. This represents a new understanding of diversity, a new understanding of American possibility.
Everybody wanted to be like us. Everybody wanted to talk like us. Everybody wanted to see our movies. They wanted to listen to our music. They wanted to wear our clothes. And some people feel like we lost that war, that revolution in the early 60s and early 70s, but we won the war in pop culture in the 90s.
Every city has cases of police brutality, but few are as brutal as the alleged attack against Haitian immigrant Abner Louima.
Nearly 2,000 demonstrators marched on the 70th precinct yesterday, where Abner Louima says police beat him and sodomized him. The attack comes at a time when New York has gained new respect for its plummeting crime rate, but complaints about police misconduct are soaring.
The plastic cups covered the shell casings from 41 bullets fired by police after they confronted Amadou Diallo, a 22-year-old West African immigrant who may have been reaching for his keys.
In many ways, the 90s ends the way it starts, with a spotlight on violence against black bodies by law enforcement. Abner Louima, Amadou Diallo, two people who did not deserve to be on the wrong side of state violence were.
In our community, we live with that fear that it could be one of our brothers or one of our nephews or one of our sons, and I just wish everyone could understand.
Diallo has become a martyr to some, a symbol of a price paid in New York's war against crime. Rudolph Giuliani has countered the outrage with carefully selected statistics.
Shots fired by police officers has decreased by 50%.
And steadfast support for the NYPD.
The New York City Police Department is the most restrained, substantially more restrained. It's among the most restrained police departments in the country.
Many people thought, even though times had progressed, in other ways, some of the images were not that much different than images people might have associated with the 50s and 60s.
We thought maybe we'd gotten past all this stuff, but it keeps happening. And it was a reminder that while the 90s represented so much growth, so much progress, we still had so much further to go.
In every society, there is a fragile balance between order and freedom. In New York these days, a number of blacks and Hispanics in particular feel that it's their freedom which has been sacrificed to achieve order. They are the ones being stopped, frisked, sometimes harassed, for no other reason than that they are black or brown and therefore suspect.
Although I would not call the 90s the best of times, the worst of times, I see it as two train tracks that dangerously went further and further apart.
It's the time that America lost its naivete and took the veil off the underlying problems in American society.
I marched in '63, I marched in '95, and I'm going to keep on marching for justice and an even playing field for all of the American people.
It was a decade of realignment. We had some wins, we had some losses, but we redefined the collective culture of America.
In one generation, we have moved from denying a black man service at a lunch counter to being a serious contender for the presidency.
It was a seminal decade that paved the way for change in a way that maybe no other one did since the 60s.
You know, we're part of a hybrid culture, and we can't deny that. So in some ways, the more obvious biracial identity that I have to affirm, African Americans also have to affirm. And white Americans have to affirm because they partake in a hybrid culture. You know, the truth of the matter is that American culture at this point, what is truly American, is black culture to a large degree. Flip on the television set. And it's had a profound influence on this entire nation, and it has to be affirmed.